Hi, I hope you find this template useful. This is a quick video to show you what's in it, just to give you an idea of the level of detail. It was originally an export from the Sectara platform where all the criteria were built up. There's about 50 odd pages, and this is just a quick view. There's a sample of an executive summary, even a fictional introduction, looking at presenting the risk assessment as a short piece of work that people can read, then the risk treatments, talking about the additional risk treatments, and then finally the annexes start getting into the background, which is where it goes through things like scope and context. It talks about exclusions. It's all fictional, of course, but when you get into this external context, it uses the PESTLE acronym, so thinking of political influences, economic factors, social, technological changes, legal environment, environmental. So it's all there for you. Just take each of those bullet points and turn it into a sentence or paragraph. Likewise, the internal context using the MORTA acronym or mnemonic, so that works through the process of one bullet point for each, or one sentence, or one paragraph, depending how complex your risk assessment is. The criteria, as it says, is further down in the document. Looking at asset criticality and a little bit of text around each of the four vital ones. This is all fictional, of course, but just to give you an idea. And then looking at the hazard and threat assessment. What are the ratings? There's a couple of examples there, but of course you could just put in your own there, taking whatever you think based on the criteria, which we'll come to. Controls assessment example there's looking at that policy assurance monitoring or policy assurance compliance. You might see it written as well to give you an idea of the text that's in there. So personnel security, looking at this is a security example. You could do the same thing with safety, with engineering, project management. Any type of risk can be managed with this template. Gets into a fairly basic risk register here, just enough to be able to link in. There's a bit of a worked example, and that's that CASE acronym to give you some guidance around how do you actually write a risk statement, and there's an example. Equally around the 4A's to give you an example of risk treatments. It's a blank document, you need to work it out for yourself, it's your own risks. But the assessment methodology, looking here at asset criticality, this is again all the criteria that we spoke about. The threat assessment criteria, noting of course that there are differences between threats and hazards. So we're looking here at hazards, saying, well, for example, how do we manage a hazard which is not man-made, so no intent and capability. This is toxic chemicals, dangerous environment, weather, what have you. Risk control effectiveness criteria. This is a very detailed example of how you might rate risk control effectiveness, going from excellent through good, fair, and poor, and then getting to non-existent. Each again, it's got that policy assurance compliance metric in there, some great guidance that you can use. Risk assessment criteria. This is a sample risk. It's fully editable. You can change this, but just looking at likelihood, consequence, talking about the risk matrix, how it might play out there. If you want to use a risk matrix, of course, you don't have to. Just an Annex G to remind you the people you spoke to, the locations you visited, where and when, any documents you reference, so for example, policies, procedures, standards, etc. And then this Annex J risk treatment plan, which links in more detail. So in this column, you'd put the name of the risk treatment, which risks are related, and so you might be treatment is to train everybody in manual handling. This might, risk number 1 might be manual handling injuries. Risk number 2 might be anything related to manual ergonomics or whatever the risk you chose. And then you look at the risk-based treatment specifications. And then this, for example, a much simpler on the next level example where you might just have a risk treatment, 1 or 2 risk numbers, or maybe 3 or 10. The risk description, talk about the specification. So what are you going to do? How do you know when you've achieved it? What actions do you have to take? How long will it take? Does it need to be to a international standard, or is there a qualification that needs to be, everybody needs to be trained to, or do you need 80% compliance with a training program? Whatever that criteria is, you document in there, who's responsible and when it's due date. And then gets into, this is another example which you can delete if you don't need, but if each of those simple risks, which might be risk number 3 is the risk treatment, there's a bit of text around what it is as a specification. But if it's something more complex, like it will take you 2 years to upgrade all the network servers, so you might say, well, you want to put physical security around that. This is very detailed actions. What are the outputs? What's the scope? Which servers does it apply to? Which risks are treated? How do you know when you've actually achieved it? what sort of resources will you need, who's responsible, in this case the fictional CIO group, quality and standards, they need to meet whatever standards, EIA or whatever you work to. Achieve when, this could be when 100% of servers racks are replaced, or when you've signed it off by the CIO or the Chief Security Officer. Some notes in there for additional explanatory material. So you've got where something will take more than a couple of weeks to do. This might take years, for sometimes 5 years worth of risk treatments. And Annex L, this is exported from Sectara. So if you'd like to automate it, go to Sectara, grab a free trial, run through it. But I think it's still worth running through this, and that's just a little bit of blurb. This comes with a standard disclaimer, so you can modify that. But of course, it's just a good idea, especially if you're working to this as a client. And of course, there's terms and definitions, just so everybody reading this will understand what they are. And an extra blank page for notes. So that's it. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that. Just to give you an idea just how detailed this entire document is. There's a lot of work, a lot of thought gone into it. It can save you hours and hours of writing, just for example, by looking at the structure and saying, okay, what do I need in, what's in, what do I need to think about? All right, I hope that was helpful. My name's Julian Talbot. Feel free to reach out and get in touch if that was helpful. And all the best with your risk assessments. Thanks very much.